Hi, welcome to the last week of April's class on digital societies. Today we'll be talking about the book Tyrants by Rob Larson. And the chapter we are analyzing is chapter 5 on the most beloved or most hated internet company, which is Google. I hope that you are feeling well and you got some time and resources to go through this chapter. But if you don't worry. This is why I'm here, to provide you some guidance, to provide you some musings. As you probably noticed, we are slowly upgrading. I added the video feed, so we could have at least this kind of social contact. And I also added another window on my notes, and I will be trying to make them as I will be discussing this chapter. So, more or less, why I have chosen this book. Truth be told, I'm still looking for interesting macro theory of digital capitalism, and we are slowly tiptoeing around it. I decided to go with Larson's book because it provides some basic overview of mechanisms or nefarious deeds that Google did or it is still doing, and it may serve as a kind of baseline of historical overview of the processes. So we may, at the next step, we may try to make some kind of more focused analysis. Today I will also use one of the pieces that Larson quotes, which is Christian Fuchs analysis of Google using the Marx theory of value creation and Marxian theory of commodity. So basically today we will use the chapter by Larson to also get the basic grasp of one of the Marxist approach on one of the chosen subjects around the digital analysis. I hope you will find this thing interesting. Certainly I did. And yeah, and if you have any comments, as always, mail me, send postal pigeons, whatever you like. So let's start. When I started reading this chapter, I was obviously I've known the famous ex-Google motto, "Don't be evil," and obviously this title, kind of, it was kind of obvious to show some not particularly good or not particularly splendid of Google's endeavors. The first thing that grasped my attention, and it's kind of, perhaps for some of you it may be obvious, but why not? So even if the author uses the term institution outside of the sociological debate, it's still kind of, it may lead us, the sociologists, into analyzing Google not as a company, not as an utility or discourse figure or discourse space, but as a social institution, which is basically true. We may analyze Google as a monopolist, and we will be doing it, but as a kind of institution, as a kind of stable benchmark, stable point of reference for different discourses, Google certainly acts like that. It is stable. It is embedded into many things internetish, and it shapes how do we see all the internet infrastructures along the way. So if you are looking for any ideas or anything fun, you may also go with the institutionalism or neo-institutionalism tradition and try to pick up the Larson story and use it to reconstruct or analyze it, the Google from institutional sense. If you are into sociology of institutions, of course. Obviously, or sorry, I shouldn't be misusing or overusing this word. So, next thing is I think that Larson here does an excellent job, not only by showing the direct quotes from Google managers, but also does interesting work to show different mechanisms and sub-mechanisms. So it's not only just plain history of developing different side products, but also kind of interim analysis of the company. First example, the basic premise of the Google is to surface results or to make better results more visible. So in basic, it's not as much a search engine, but rather a selection engine. So from the very beginning, and this is one of the takeaways that you should be taking or remembering after today's meeting, is that no internet tool is transparent. There is always an algorithm. Some spelling issues. So the Google is no exception for that. You shouldn't, or the basic critical gesture or intuition is to regard any kind of content, any kind of cultural artifact that you find on the internet, on any web page or any social media, not only as a result of direct author's creation, but also a result of selection process. And Google, and we'll get into this, but we may use this occasion to start. Google maintains this kind of half secret or this mixture of secrecy and opacity, as discussed by Zuboff. What do I mean is that Google tries to be transparent, tries to hide as much as it could the selection process. Its algorithm tries to be practically invisible to any user or any advertiser, but at the same time it's an absolute black box. So we may not see the Google's algorithm, but at the same time we cannot see into it. It's kind of, at the same time it's perfectly transparent. It makes as little fuss as it is possible. It stays as in background as it is possible. It tries to be fast, silent, non-intrusive, just smooth search engine, not a selector of information, not a broker of information, dealer of information, not something that has active role in curating the information that we get, but just a transparent provider. Shoshana Zuboff wrote about this, and Larson picks up some of its argument. But you know, let's put it into our note. Let's get back to the lesson. A moment of truth from one of the Google's executives. We do not monetize the thing we create. We monetize the people who use it. Perhaps you'll feel or you have some intuition, where do we go? And there is this obvious quotation that will surface in a minute. But let's look at one more comment that I did here earlier. Or don't worry. Okay, the next part is a short history of Google, and from which we could take a note that the role of the DARPA and National Science Foundation in funding the early stages of a Google. So from the very beginning, the classic Silicon Valley myth of two brave individual creators from a garage, the rebels or whatever's, kind of falls apart, because both of the Google original creators, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, were PhD candidates in computer science in Stanford while receiving money from basically the US military to do some experimental search engines to try to figure it out. And if you are interested in uncovering more of this myth, I sincerely suggest or sincerely recommend Mariana Mazzucato's book, Entrepreneurial State. Here also, apart from kind of silent reference to the Mazzucato, Larson also quotes Aaron Rao, one of the Silicon Valley historians, and it's another interesting twist of the usual brave inventor story. What if there is something in the digital infrastructure, digital markets, that favors monopolies? Or in other words, what if search engines, social media are governed by this rule: either you are the first or you do not exist. Either you go for the first price or you are reduced to absolute minimality. And if you go through the search engine market, this is certainly true, because as the Larson suggests, the Google has above 90% of the market share. So that's the first part. But the second part, that it's also worth noticing, is that at the beginning, Google positioned itself as a kind of anti-Microsoft, tried to create this PR of a cool company, cool, creative, open, positive, don't be evil. And there is a kind of irony around it, but if you are interested, you could read the Larson's book itself. The next part is that Google, as well as Amazon, is a shrewd negotiator. So the big companies usually try to find small rural towns in US and negotiate heavy tax breaks, heavy infrastructure investments from the side of the town. And here we see NDA, this non-disclosure agreement, because I kind of agree to maintain secrecy about the negotiation about the Google land lease for the server farm. So again, even in the physical reality, even in a negotiation with a small town, which has absolutely smaller budget than the Google. So even in this case, Google maintains this black box behavior, tries to keep a low profile, tries to delay announcement of interest until the very last moment, tries to be untransparent, tries to be secretive about its inner machinations. I think that using the Googleization of everything is interesting part, and I wouldn't try to quote the surname of Professor Siva, but that's kind of more cultural critique of Google rather than kind of social economical. But the culture thing or culture pickup would be if you value links by quotations, and that was the basic of the Google PageRank engine, then as a result, who is quoted more, or who is, or what content is being quoted more, it appears higher on the Google search results. So in a result, what existed longer in the history, or what maintained larger followership, or what was more stabilized in the center of discourse, or what was made an obvious fact, it basically has advantage over new proposals. So in a way, the very nature of the algorithm used as the basics of Google makes the results kind of conservative. Not necessarily in a political state, in a kind of political spectrum, but conservative in the sense of kind of making the new ideas harder to push, rather in competition with the older ideas. Not because the Google managers are afraid of the new ideas, or not because Google programmers are inclined in any kind of old stuff, but because of the technical solution chosen as a basics of a search engine. Obviously, so that's the first part, kind of conservative character of the algorithm. Than well established. All right, so let's move on. The next part worth paying attention to is blurring the line between results and adverts. So if you are searching for something in Google, the search is a result of your effort or your need, and advertisement is a kind of extra added by Google as a basic of its monetization module. And this practice of mixing results or content with the ads was also adopted by many kind of shady business, shady outfits of digital journalism. For example, Natemat. In case of Natemat, sometimes it's called reklama natywna or native advertisement, which may be defined as a kind of advertisement that it's very hard to discern from the content, from the text. So in other words, when you are reading something, you don't know whether it is a content created by somebody interested in it, by an author, by a journalist, or whether you are watching an ad added as an extra layer to the existing content. And here comes my absolutely perfectly favorite quote about church state wall separating results and ad mechanisms. What do I love about this quotation? Basically, I'm from Poland, so when I hear church-state separation as an example of this kind of honesty, yeah, I perfectly do know what to think about it. Let's move on. If you haven't read it, or if you are more interested in this kind of information effects of a Google, not in the sense of radicalization, but in the sense of enclosement or enclosure of the discourse spaces, I do recommend Filter Bubble by Ali Pariser, or at least his TED Talk. It's really interesting. It's slightly outdated because Google reacted to it, but the mechanism is still on. So the filter bubble is an effect that when you are searching in a Google, the Google tries to cater the results to the things that Google knows about you. So in a way, it tries to personalize your searches. So in a way, when you are Googling for something, the results you get are very singular. They may not be necessarily shared by other people. And it has sociological consequence. So if you have lower cultural capital, or if you are Googling for weaker sources, or if you are Googling for short, shiny, controversial, whatever, then the Google will be feeding more of it to you. So in a way, Google strength does not equalize the cultural capital or social capital. It's not the biggest library in the world. It's kind of thing that creates very individual libraries catered to a specific person. One of my favorite sayings is could be adapted. Sorry, in original it wasn't very fortunate, but it could go along this line. If you have been, if everything that you have been using Google for was looking for a porn, then Google would have problems showing you the biology of reproductive organs, because it will feed you with more porn, not necessarily with biological data. So in a way, it replicates what you already know. It replicates your social capital. if you are not accustomed into reading longer texts, then Google will feed you shorter texts. If you are not accustomed to more complicated concepts or longer tutorials, then Google will feed you with easier, more accessible, and more often than not, rather shallow, rather controversial things. So, in a way, Google curates you to remain the same, to maintain same search patterns and also same reading patterns. So this is a very nefarious or interesting, whatever you, however you define it, is Google doesn't try to convey you any particular one propaganda. Except of, there is one exception, we'll get into it. Rather than that, Google tries to put you in a place or tries to make you remain in the same spot of knowledge searching and reading. Google doesn't challenge you to go for something more in-depth, something more problematic. Rather than that, Google or some parts of a Google like YouTube may push you for something more controversial, because controversy get as the Google find out or as the YouTube find out, the controversy breeds more clicks or more views than actual in-depth data. So in a way, Google is not only a big brother because it knows everything. Google also a new propaganda mechanism because it delivers personalized propagandas or propagandas customized to yourself. Similarly goes, and here we come to one example or one exception, which is obviously if you try to use Google to push content critical about the Google or critical about the Google advertisers, Google will sink you. Google will make it less visible. So it's not an honest broker. It's not honest mirror. It skews or it curates the search result. And another example of this very subtle, very almost invisible mechanism of control is by designing a menus, hiding something, making something to require more clicks, like privacy settings in Chrome. Obviously, there was a European Union debate or European Union trial against the Google monopoly, and you should also know that that may be another funny aphorism, whatever is your choice, that one of the biggest customers of a Google is Google itself. What do I mean? I mean that Google uses itself to promote its products, to make you use not only a search engine, but Google by Gmail and YouTube, and integrating one with another. So that is the next step from platform optics which we have discussed earlier. This is the step of moving you from using the platforms into being in digital ecosystem, absolutely owned, absolutely controlled by the company. And Google is not the only company that tries to do that. It's the similar thing is absolutely maintained by Apple, and also Facebook tries to do similar things with the smaller services. So Google could downrank, could make something more obscure, may try to hide something to switch your attention from something, and so on and so on. Obviously, we will find good old capitalism corruption or good old capitalism lobbying. And as a kind of side note, I did a small social giga research as funded by Google on hackers. The Google financed the kickstart of Digital Economy Lab. They didn't require any how to say it. It didn't interfere into my writing or into my research. It just spread the money just in an attempt to shift my perspective of Google. Yeah, and you could call me a hypocrite. If there is one, I don't know if it's a good trait or bad. I could only say that Google didn't finance me. Google financed me with much lower numbers than mentioned by Larson. I guess it was, I don't know, 1,000 bucks, 3,000 zlotys, something like that. All right, let's move on. The classical controversy, the Young Manifest is contradicted when the founder grows old, or in other words, Google does not live up to its beginnings. But this is capitalism. Move on. You should remember that behind the Google, or another element of a Google, is also a bidding system or a virtual marketplace for advertisement, and Google certainly uses it. So we may use this occasion to switch into Fuchs analysis of Fuchs market analysis of value creation in Google. Fuchs used classical Marxist capital accumulation cycle, and I will try to explain every step of it. So the initial question is, in which moment does Google create value out of its operations? What is the cycle of capital accumulation or value accumulation in Google? Or in search engine, to be more precise. So at the beginning, we have money. Then money is being used to buy capital. And at this moment, this capital, it's very simple. It's just some basic servers, basic processing power. It doesn't have any employees. It doesn't require any work. Just kind of, just the hardware. And living and so on and so on. And here comes the first stage of value creation, which is transforming bot stuff into a search engine, which involves programming, which involves setting up networks, which involves providing web page, kind of, making things work. So Fuchs proposes that this is the first moment of value creation, resulting in first product. it's not commodity, it's just a product because it's not being sold. You do not pay for Google services, but it doesn't mean that the value is not being created. So, at least in an Marxist approach. And at this moment, the Google pays wages for the Google workers, which would be V1, and some C as costs of electricity and costs of, non-human upkeep costs to create the product 1, and this product is not a commodity but a free lunch. But Fuchs argues that even at this moment, even in providing this free service, Google creates a value because obviously it works as a search engine, and if it it could you follow the standard Marxist cycle and try to sell it as a product, but it doesn't. So then Google transforms the free lunch or your searches into the actual commodity, the second product, which is a packages of your attention to be sold to advertisers. At this moment, this is a commodity because it is being sold. It is being valued in money. This is the second cycle of accumulation, or the second stage of value creation. You should note, this is really interesting. I think that Fuchs got it right. If we remember that V is a cost of labor in a Marxist's capital accumulation cycle, we should see that the labor cost for this product is 0 because you did the labor. You did the labor of providing time or providing these packages of blocks that could be used for advertising. So it doesn't have any labor costs. Not because it doesn't pay its programmers, but it doesn't have to pay you to prepare the space for advertisers. And here the Fuchs combines the running costs or non-human costs into 1C and assumes it was paid earlier. I don't want... I have some objections about it, but it's a minor detail. And the last phase of value creation, using advertisements to get more capital. What does it mean? It means that at the beginning we just have network with some program, with some working infrastructure, with some basic search engine. Then it network was used by you. Then your usage was being transformed into advertisements. The advertisements were being sold, and as a result, the whole process, the whole relation has more value than at the beginning, because for example, the Google gathered more user base, and if it likes, it may use this second larger capital C prim into more money basically. And within this theory, if we follow the Fuchs logic, we could see that users, if we adopt the Marxist approach at least, the users are not the product. The users are unpaid labor. That would be the Marxist approach. So in a way, we all are the workers of a Google. but Google just pays some of us, just the programmers and the actual Google staff. That would be the Marxist approach. Because if you are necessary to create a value for a digital company, and basically users are, then you are the worker. So there is this famous anecdote about the internet, and it went viral in different versions. So the anecdote goes, if you are not the paying customer, then you are the product. So if we adopt the Marxist approach, and why not? Marxist approach is lovely. Then we may say, in a Marxist approach, if you are not paying for a digital product, then you are unpaid labor. That would be the Marxist version of this saying. And the part on the YouTube is kind of interesting because Larson argues that the YouTube algorithm is separate from the Google algorithm, as you probably know, or the YouTube search engine is not the Google search engine and meshed into YouTube. It's a wholly different beast. And Larson argues that the YouTube algorithm strives not into filter bubble as the main Google search engine. It strives for controversy. It strives for more clicks. It strives into presenting radical views on the same ground as more usual ones. Here I use with the example of Flat Earth Society, but we may skip it. So if we another advice. Perhaps you have heard about it because Slate or Medium discussed this weird world of cartoons for children created by automated learning systems. So in other words, cartoons that are being created out of the existing blocks, then automatically animated. The stories are so generic that they are also being written. Same goes with the dialogues. So some of the companies uses this kind of weird automated cartoons to sell more ads connected with their YouTube channels. So in a way, if you are interested in the weird stuff, then I do recommend reading the Medium article, but I sincerely do not recommend trying to watch this kind of movies on YouTube. It's a sick shit. I do promise. So yeah. And about the cookies or about the private data, probably you know it. And there is a short part about the drone striking, but it's not that interesting for our debate. So what to pick up from it? The concept of transparent black box. So when it's working, the digital companies try to be transparent. But when you try to look at them, they become absolutely secret. It's one of the differences between older capitalist companies and newer capitalist companies. And about the conservative character of search, if you are interested in kind of more political discourse, and blurring the line between results and ads. And also the new type of a big brother. To remember, no internet tool is transparent, there is always an algorithm beneath it. And if you are not paying the customer, then you are the product. Or if you like, then you are unpaid labor. This quotation is interesting because originally it was said in 70s about the television, about the television revenue model, because in television basically works on ads, or the advertisement is the main source of TV income, and it kind of leads us into comparisons between Google and TV. So if you like, you may try to construct a Marxist model for TV and compare it to a Google, asking at which moment the value is being created in a TV accumulation circle. What is being problematic about the Larson? I would say it's kind of too descriptive. Sorry, I should go to the notes. Oh yeah, right. So what's problematic about the Larson? It's slightly too descriptive. And I would say, yeah, the model of the accumulation or model of the value creation of a Google, as proposed by Fuchs, I think it's cool, and I think kind of, in its detail, the Marxist approach got it really right. But because, for example, other economic value creation models would argue that when you are not paying for the Google service, then the Google doesn't create a value, because there is no price being set up at this moment. But in a more Marxist approach, yeah. But what do I found kind of problematic? I'd love to read more sociological treatment on the audience theory, or how the Google maintains its audience as an unpaid labor. The Fuchs does it, and I think that Larson should follow slightly more on this road. Also, I really think that instead of analyzing drone strikes, which is an obvious war crime, an obvious application of IT into warfare, a really interesting part would be examining, for example, Google Zero program, which is a Google anti-hacking safer internet program. That would be really something, or involvement of Google with Boston Dynamics. But if you like, it's up to you. I'm just but all in all, as a kind of introductory historical piece, as a kind of food for thought, for at the beginning, for kind of something different, I think it's a nice book. And if you are interested into it, you may read different chapters and use it as a basics of your final works. If you have any questions, so this is more or less everything. If you have any questions, do not hesitate calling me or doing anything you like, or mailing me, and have a good time. See you around. Keep yourself safe. And I wish to say that I'm kind of missing you because I do enjoy your company, and at this moment I kind of I like teaching, and I got more comfortable with telling things online, but with all those things, and even if in the comfort space of my room, I still prefer our in-face meetings and your questions, your audience. It's so much more natural and stimulating for thinking for me. So see you around. Have a good time.